If you can't seem to be free from porn, then this video is for you. I have one piece of advice that if I could narrow everything down into one video, then this is the one piece of advice I'd give you to actually move the needle, to actually gain freedom. And that piece of advice would be to stop hating yourself. It's so easy to, once after we relapse, to have this shame, think, I'm so guilty, I'm such a bad person, and I cannot stop. I had this for 10 years. I couldn't stop watching porn, and I hated myself for it. And at the very end, I couldn't even write my own name down because I hated myself. And I'd like to share with you the one thing that helped that, and that was to be curious about why you're watching it. So I'd like to set the stage to explain a bit. So the shame cycle is where you relapse, you then have this negative self-talk and you hate yourself. You can't seem to be free of it. And in order to avoid that feeling, because it's uncomfortable when we feel like we can't, when we're trapped, it's uncomfortable. And when we feel stuck, we often go back to the very thing that we're trying to get rid of. And that was my thing. I feel so much hatred, self-hatred and shame that I would just go straight back to the thing I was trying to avoid. So I'd like to give you 3 things to do to combat shame. Firstly is to differentiate shame from guilt. So shame is when you feel like I'm wrong, I am bad, I am a bad person internally. Whereas guilt is just noticing that that action, that thing is bad. Not me personally, not you personally, but what you've done. That's guilt, that's bad. Okay, right, so once you differentiate shame from guilt, you can see that you're not a bad person, that there's actions that you're taking which aren't helpful, which aren't serving you, but you're not bad. Secondly, is to give yourself radical self-care. And what I mean by that is look after yourself, do things to yourself that you would do to a dear friend. Treat yourself like someone who's really important, really loved, because you are. You need to, if there's actions that you could take to treat yourself, like have a good healthy meal, listen to some good music that you enjoy, get a massage, something that you can do to treat yourself. Because when we feel shame and we feel like we're such bad people, it's hard to treat ourselves as if we're not. So by looking after ourselves, we're actually kind of reversing this, this negative thing. Thirdly, it's to be curious as to why you relapsed. Almost step back and look at yourself from a third person's perspective. So you step back, you see, okay, what was I feeling? What was I going through just before I relapsed? And you're able to see that thing that was sort of tripping you up, and you can see the reason why you went there. And it helps to see that you're not a bad person. You're not a bad person. You had a hard emotion that you couldn't deal with at the time, or you were struggling to feel that. So you went to numb that feeling into the shame. So something that helped me, right, was when I was curious, I was actually able to confront the fear that I was a terrible person, that I did these things that I hated myself for. I could actually step back and see what I was numbing, and the fear of not knowing if I was a pervert or if I was this ugly thing. The fear I was able to deal with that, and that fear subsided. It takes courage to look deeper. When we when we look deeply at ourselves and be curious, we're not running away, we're not avoiding this, and we are actually stepping into ourselves and trying to understand what we're trying to numb. Curiosity also leads to ownership. When we're not numbing, when we can actually see what it is, we're not blaming others for our habits. We're not blaming others for why we're watching porn. But we can take accountability, see what it is that we're actually running from, and take actions as to what we can do going forward to combat that. So I hope that helped. Being curious is the antidote to shame. If you're feeling full of shame, you're okay. I was there. I know what it feels like. I was there for 10 years. I'm not a therapist, but I've been there, and I'm here to help you step out. Not just to quit porn, but to help you be someone who doesn't need it anymore. I'll catch you next time.